Good morning on this Sunday, September 15th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The Atlanta School Board makes a surprise announcement. No more contract extensions for Superintendent Maria Karstafen. Perhaps no surprise from John Ossoff. He's in the race for U.S. Senate. Is Governor Brian Kemp any closer to selecting someone to replace Senator Johnny Isakson? And just where does Georgia rank when it comes to new voter registrations and the number of voters purged from the rolls? Kathy Woolard is in for Theron. Phil, Janelle, and Alexis are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
What a week it has been for APS Superintendent Maria Karstafen, who learned her contract will not be renewed after what many view as a successful 5-year run at the helm.
Well, it was a bit of a surprise on Monday for me, only because it was my understanding that the board was split.
Maria Karstafen says she was surprised the board decided against extending her contract. Graduation rates are at an all-time high and test scores are way up in the urban district, so the decision isn't necessarily performance-based. Karstafen came in after the district made national headlines for the largest cheating scandal in U.S. history. APS school board member Cynthia Briscoe Brown listened in on Karstafen's roundtable meeting with reporters and said the district's urgent problems have been solved.
We needed a firefighter, quite honestly, and she was a fabulous professional firefighter. But I think we're in a very different place.
Karstafen disagrees and says there's still work to be done. Kathy, is 5 years enough to really turn around a school district like APS that was in such turmoil?
Well, I don't know how long is enough, but 5 years is a good long run for anybody in an executive position where your house is on fire. I think the key thing for the school board on this was, you know, did Karstafen want to keep the job? There have been lots of rumors of her thinking about running for the Senate, thinking about running for mayor, all kinds of other things. And I think that's tempered some of the decisions she's made along the way. And so I think the school board was probably thinking, now it's time to see who's going to settle in for the next phase of this.
Phil, what's your take on this? Because we kind of discussed it last week, and if it's not performance-based, I hadn't heard that she was possibly going to make another run for office. What do you think?
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, I think that she did a very good job, and to your point, 5 years is not enough. There's some fine schools in the public school system of Atlanta, but then there's some really terrible, unperforming schools. To her credit, graduation rates are up 20%, test scores have come up. She actually closed some bad performing schools in some neighborhoods, took a lot of flack for it. She fought the left-wing teacher union bosses who wanted public schools to stay the same and have no parental choice. She opened up charter schools. I will say this, she made some enemies with some personality conflicts. I don't like the way the board handled it. The mission of the Atlanta School Board is to be transparent and accountable. Well, that was just thrown into the garbage can. And they didn't say why, they didn't renew her contract. And I think Jason Estevez, the chairman of the board, gave her a glowing report in April, and now he flips on her and says, we don't want her anymore. I think that they still need to explain to the people of Atlanta what happened.
Yeah, Janelle, I know that some of the teacher groups said no because of her stance on some of the charter schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that's a reason to get rid of her. I share the same issues as you share. I think transparency is the biggest issue right now. Whenever you have elected officials who decide that they want to make decisions without consulting the constituents, if I am a parent or a part of the community and I have no idea what your vote is or why you're voting the way you're voting, then that tells me that there was no consulting with the people that you're representing, and that's a problem for me. And then to say that she was, doing well at one point, and this is not performance-based. Well, if it's not performance-based, then that means it's just personal, which is another issue that I have with this.
And Alexis, when you had folks like Congressman John Lewis and former Governor Roy Barnes and former Mayor Shirley Franklin come out in support of Karstafen, what's the issue here, do you think?
Well, I think their people on the outside. They're not necessarily within the system to really know what's going on. So that's one thing. They're basing their opinions on the performance that she's made with the school system. So there's a good thing to have that support. However, I don't know what the problem was, but it was clearly something. But they also made that decision last summer, was when the board actually voted on that. And they voted to let her contract expire. So it wasn't a surprise at all to her. You know, I guess she hoped that the celebrity endorsements would turn them around, but it did not.
Kathy, though many were surprised by Board Chairman Jason Estevez's decision, Phil, you pointed out, it was almost a change of heart when he went into the no category because he's been so supportive of her. What did you make of that?
You know, we're probably not ever going to know, because the spin on both sides has been pretty massive and very effective, I think. But I do think that the repercussions to the school board in the next election for not being transparent, not necessarily for the decision they made, but for not being transparent, I think are going to come back to haunt members of the school board. Next time around.
I don't think we're talking about the kids enough. You know, their children being affected.
If I was going to be the new superintendent and wanted to be interviewed, I'd be kind of nervous about how the board handles handles you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, too, to see if we ever get back to the place where we were with Alonzo Krim. He was superintendent for 15 years, which was a long time, which was, I guess it stabilized the system, but there were some good things and bad things about it, I suppose. But now we have more technology and more. So
well, she did a lot of good.
Things,
so we're going to move on now, because Stacey Abrams had a memo to national Democrats calling it strategic malpractice if they don't pour resources into Georgia next year. Could it be cheaper and more effective for the National Democratic Party to spend money here rather than in the Ohios of the United States? Phil, you want to weigh in on this?
I'd be
I mean,
happy
you know,
to
we
weigh
are
in.
a battleground state is what everybody's saying.
Well,
which we've heard for a long time, too.
I think we are a possible swing state, and I would remind folks that Donald Trump won by 5 points in 2016, and I would refer to the recent Georgia 9th District congressional race. The left-wing media in North Carolina, that's right, the left-wing media claimed that this is really a bellwether race, and the Republicans are in trouble, blah, 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 and the Republican won in a suburban and a rural district, and won, and Janelle, you followed the numbers, won in some minority districts, which really shocked the Democrats. I would say this is pretty much the same as Georgia's 6th district. In many other districts, the Republicans and Stacey Abrams claim that Republicans are weak, and yes, there's been some hemorrhaging in suburban metro Atlanta, but I think that the extreme agenda of the U.S. Democrat candidates for Georgia's Senate seats already, talking about supporting the Green New Deal, which would cost trillions for open borders. I think that that's pushing a lot of the moderates and independents over to Republicans, and both parties have to capture moderates and Republicans to win in Georgia statewide.
But Kathy, Stacey Abrams also made this mention that, you know, Democrats don't have to ignore rural parts of the states in order to capture votes. That seems to be like the mindset that they've been stuck in.
Yeah, well, listen, I think that there is a big case to be made for Democrats to be talking to particularly farmers in Southwest Georgia. We've got a Secretary of Agriculture appointed by Trump. We've got his cousin who's up for re-election in the Senate, and they have failed until this year to get aid for people who were hurt in the hurricanes. I think that farmers are going to be really open to hearing from Democrats about what they would do under different circumstances. And if you think about Abrams being a potential vice presidential candidate and 2 Senate seats open and Rob Woodall's seat open in North Atlanta, you really have a perfect storm for reaching out to women, for reaching out to people of color and motivating Democrats to get out and vote. I think I'd put all the money on Georgia and go for broke.
Janelle, you want to weigh in on this?
So when I saw this, I look at Stacey Abrams as being the Democratic coach of the Democratic teams. I feel like, you know, but every team has a coach, every team has strategies and plays, but the biggest question is, are there starters and all-stars who can actually deliver and execute on it? That I don't feel. I don't feel as though, even on the presidential level or on the state level here in Georgia, that there are any all-stars on the Democratic team right now other than Stacey Abrams, and she's not running. So I guess, you know, her being the coach is going to help some way or another, but I just feel like, again, it's just another play by the Democratic Party. I don't think it's strong enough.
Well, I think it is extraordinary that we're going to have this Georgia in play, and it's all thanks to Stacey Abrams and her fantastic run in 2018. And I think that it will augur well for the Democrats and could possibly turn Georgia blue. Jeff Dickerson said on this show about 5 years ago that it would be 2020 when Georgia turned blue.
But we'll see.
His prediction.
That leads us into our second block.
What did Jeff know?
He's not here anymore. Coming up, another Democrat is looking to unseat Republican Senator David Perdue. How Jon Ossoff changes the race. Coming up.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Jon Ossoff became the fourth Democrat hoping to unseat Republican incumbent Senator David Perdue. You know, Alexis, he's got a lot of name ID here in Metro Atlanta, but how do you think he'll fare in rural Georgia, and how does he get some of those votes in rural Georgia?
Well, I think he's going to follow Stacey Abrams' playbook and have, you know, precincts all over the state and have campaign going on, voter registration and all that going on the entire time. So I think he has a really good shot at it, depending on how Perdue behaves and how, you know, how things go. But I think he's got a good chance.
Kathy, how do you see him in this race? I mean, is he the front runner? He's really aligned himself with Stacey Abrams, but then again, so did Sarah Riggs-Amico. And Teresa Tomlinson is really popular right now.
Yeah, I think Teresa Tomlinson's, in my mind, she's the front runner. I think Sarah's probably a close second in that regard. I think John's got, you know, some work to do to kind of bring himself up to where they are. They've been organizing for a long time. I think it's, you know, there's going to be some momentum about electing a woman to the U.S. Senate. That hasn't happened in this place in some time, and you know, I think Teresa's got some good momentum right now.
Janelle, he came out swinging against Senator Perdue in terms of, you know, the gated community comments, a lot of talk about corruption. It's obviously going to be a nasty fight no matter who the nominee is. What did you think about, you know, his release and all of that?
Yeah, well, I feel like I have a little history with Jon Ossoff because I assisted Karen Handel with her race against him. So I remember how he fought, as well as the technology that he used, which was really sophisticated, if I might add, as it relates to his campaign. However, I don't think voters take to a lot of the nasty swings. I think Senator Perdue is a professional at this. He's done this for a long time. I think he's been a great senator, and I really feel that he will pull it out and continue to keep the seat.
But he's a professional executive. He's not a professional politician.
Well, we don't want him to be a professional politician. We want him to be a public servant, and that's what he is. And I feel as though that's what he's proven.
Well, he doesn't prove that he can get reelected. That's what he hasn't had a chance to do.
Let me say this. The favorable ratings for David Perdue have always been over 50% in this state, and he is a fine public servant. I think it's slander for Jon Ossoff to try to link him with some sort of corruption. There's no proof of that whatsoever. And I would say, just for maybe viewers that don't understand all of this process, there will be a Democratic gubernatorial primary that picks the party's nominee. And so Ossoff is now being pushed to the left even more, if this is possible, by Ted Terry of Clarkston, the mayor of Clarkston. He's in there. He's for open borders. He's for the Green New Deal. That's a command and control socialist scheme. The others are following in these footsteps. I think this is getting too radical. Even Theron Johnson has said, you know, that the Democrats have to be very careful about going too far to the left, and they are doing that, and Ossoff is just joining in the pack. And I don't think, again, the centrists, the moderates, and independents of this state do not want all of this big tax, big spending Democrat philosophy.
I think that's going to be the Republican party line anyway, regardless of what they say.
It's also true.
Well, I'm just saying, and no matter how centrist they get, they're still going to be called socialists. I mean, that's been the mantra from the last since
Well,
4
I
or
mean,
5 years.
to your credit, it's no matter how hard we work or Republicans work, they'll still be called racist. So I think that at the end of the day, it goes back to what you were saying about, with John. We've seen him run. We've seen how it all works. So I think that right now, the biggest thing is to focus on some of the other candidates. I wish the Democratic Party will allow there to be a democratic process during their primaries, but we all know that a lot of times it is they push someone to the front.
We know there are 2 U.S. Senate races here in Georgia, and Governor Kemp says he has no timeline to replace the retiring Senator Johnny Isakson. And we were talking about this on Bill Neiget's Political Rewind show, and I need to give a plug to Bill's show since he always plugs the Georgia gang. This person, if you think about it, will have to fulfill the term while campaigning, possibly going into a runoff, and then if he or she wins, turning right around and campaigning for 2022. I mean, I'm tired even just talking about that. So who does this person have to be that Brian Kemp picks? Phil?
Well, the good news on the Republican side is you've got a lot of folks on a deep bench that have run statewide or have run in districts or have run campaigns and have proven 2 things. And we've talked about this. You have to raise money quickly, to your point, Lori, and also you have to be electable. And so we could run down names and speculate. I don't know if that does us any good today. But I think the fact that you have to be compatible with, obviously, Governor Kemp, to be ready to run again, to your point, in 2022, that's going to be a big factor. And you have to be compatible with President Trump and with Senator David Perdue. And I think there's a lot of big names that can get money fast that can do that.
Kathy, no one on the Democratic side has jumped in just yet.
There's been a lot of, I guess, talk about it,
chit-chat,
consideration.
of course. There's been chit-chat on both sides, but what do you see? Will there be high-profile names coming to this race?
I think there'll be a cast of thousands. Despite the fact that somebody would have to run again, possibly run again, and over the course of about 4 years, Georgia will be in play. There will be a lot of money that comes here. So the fundraising aspect of the person who sort of emerges at the end will be helped along by that. But I think that there will be a calculus, and I think the governor is going to hold his powder in terms of who he appoints, because there's no point in getting out ahead of it, right? The Republican Party, like the Democrats, will fund that candidate, and it's in the governor's best interest to not show his cards too soon, because he could appoint a woman, he could appoint a person of color, he could appoint Chris Carr, the Attorney General, who everyone seems to like, but that's all going to go into the calculus, and I think the Democrats are going to be waiting too. So we might wait a bit before we see how that turns out.
Very good points. Well, coming up, new numbers show Georgia bounced a lot of people from the voter rolls, but also signed up high numbers of new voters. We discuss coming up.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
A new report shows Georgia has both high numbers of voter purges, but also high numbers of new voter registrations, and both sides of the debate are weighing in. The national report shows Georgia purged almost 800,000 voters from the rolls between 2016 and 2018, the 8th highest rate in the nation. Now, at the same time, Georgia signed up more than 900,000 voters, the nation's 9th largest increase. So, Phil, what do these numbers tell us?
The numbers tell us that Georgia is following federal law when it comes to purging people who are dead or moved away. And that's where you get potential fraud. And secondly, let me finish, and secondly, it was the Republicans and then Governor Nathan Deal that increased voter registration for all in this state by linking it to when you renew your driver's license. That was 3 years ago. We have record numbers of people, including minorities, that have been registered in this state. There's a lot of mythology going on around here that there's suppression fostered by Stacey Abrams, and it's simply not true.
Alexis, you wanted to weigh in.
Well, I disagree with his opinion about whether there's voter suppression. I think there has been, and there continues to be. However, I do think it's a good thing with the driver's license registration, but I ought to just also include voter ID, just a state ID card, that they ought to be automatically registered to vote too when you get that, because a lot of millennials don't have cars and they don't have driver's license. So that's missing a whole group of folk.
Janelle?
Yeah, so I totally think that we have been vindicated with this. I mean, when it comes to the whole voter suppression in the state of Georgia, this just proves that there is a healthy voting process and that's happening, and that our Secretary of State understands how this works. I mean, this is what's supposed to happen. If we keep everyone on the voting list, it opens us up to voter fraud more so than anything else.
Well, Kathy, we've got a big test for Georgia's new voting machines in November. Paulding and Bartow counties will test them out here in Metro Atlanta before the presidential primary in March. A lot of fingers are crossed here.
Bless their hearts. Somebody's got to go first, and everybody's going to be watching.
Yeah. A tough test coming up. While Georgia's Governor Kemp gearing up for the census count next year, it is going to be a really, really busy year, appointing several members to the bipartisan Complete Count Committee, including yours truly, along with Theron Johnson. We'll also be co-directors of the Marketing Committee. You know, there are lots of challenges ahead. This is the first year you can fill out your form online. A lot of mistrust of the government out there, Phil, and the U.S. Supreme Court took care of the citizenship question. It will not be on the form. But as I mentioned, there are a lot of challenges.
Well, that's a shame that the citizenship question won't be on the form, although the Trump administration says there's other ways and other agencies to try to figure it out, because as we all know, that's how you look at reapportionment of, say, congressional districts, and also how grants are made. But we've got to do it. This is mandated by the Constitution, and so let's let the games begin on the census. It's going to be difficult.
Kathy, and there is a lot at stake here, and millennials also are a group that we're going to target because they've never done it before. They don't realize necessarily what it's for.
Yeah, most people don't realize that the census numbers are highly tied to how much money that flows back into the state from the taxes that we pay to the federal government for social services and roads and infrastructure and all those kinds of things. So it's enormously high stakes for Georgia to be able to do a good count. It'd be great if we all come together in a nonpartisan or bipartisan manner to get that job done, because we all benefit from doing that well, and then we go right from there into redistricting, and that's when the real fun begins. Trying to figure out how to have a fair and transparent redistricting process is going to be uppermost in people's minds.
Yeah, because a congressional district has to have about 500,000 people, and that's how you map it, and that's how we need to have an accurate count.
And that's how you have some of those strange, bizarre districts.
Like what Governor Roy Barnes did.
Take us somewhere else.
Well, no. Well, for Roy Barnes was like 20 years ago.
Yeah, and it was ruled unconstitutional what they tried to pull.
But you know, back to the census.
Let's just say cheating on redistricting is a bipartisan manner. What has to happen for the citizens of Georgia is that we have districts that make sense, that reflect the values of the people that live in those areas, and that also reflects the voting population of our state. And that's going to be the real challenge.
And Janelle, since you are a millennial,
yes.
just want to let you know that for every person in 2010 who filled out the census, it was about $2,300 in value returned back to the state annually.
Yes.
So it is a big deal. Now, how will you get the word out?
Well, starting here, I am definitely, as a senior millennial, encouraging all millennials.
So I won't lump you in the category.
I know, but I'm encouraging all millennials to make sure to participate. I really don't think that's going to be an issue this time, because millennials seem to be very engaged in the voting process and what's happening right now. So I think that's going to be okay this go around. The biggest question for me is a citizenship issue, because I mean, how do we count citizens if we don't know if you're citizens? Simple as that. You know, I think we need to definitely have a citizenship question.
Okay. Well, it is a bipartisan committee, just to let you all know. So coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Winners and losers in just a moment, but first, a follow-up to a discussion on this program 2 weeks ago about potential air pollution related to the Sterigenics medical sterilization facility in Cobb County. Now, during that discussion, I said that an explosion that injured a worker at the Sterigenics plant last year went unreported. In fact, the company did report the explosion to regulators 18 hours after it happened and advised state authorities the next day. Now to winners and losers, and we will start with Alexis, as we remember Juanita Abernathy, who died at the age of 89.
Yes, it was very sad, but you know, it's solemn. Her family was there, 3 of her 4 children and her grandchildren were at her bedside when she passed. And she was the widow of Ralph David Abernathy, who was a lieutenant to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They both were together from the day one in the Montgomery bus boycotts. And he traveled around with him, and she hosted them in their home and everything through the years. So, and she also went on to have her own career after he died. And she will be missed. I also want to recognize the Slutty Vegan founder, Pinky Cole. She helped to pay off college debt for 30 students at Clark Atlanta University, her own alma mater.
Yes.
So we had to go support her restaurant.
Okay, and Janelle.
Awesome. Definitely sending my condolences to the Abernathy family as well. She did awesome job. We appreciate all that the Abernathy family has done for civil rights. And I would like to make my winner President Trump, believe it or not. No, I love President Trump because what he did was for HBCUs. Recently, he made it possible for HBCUs that have religious affiliation to receive federal funding, which is a big deal. I went to a HBCU, so I understand how important this is in my experience. So shout out to President Trump for that.
Phil.
Well, I've got a winner. Remember, just last Sunday we had that ship turnover between St. Simons and Jekyll Island, and the Coast Guard is my winner. And fortunately, there really seems to be, from what I'm hearing, not that much environmental damage. So I think a bullet may have been dodged there.
Knock on wood, yes.
Knock on wood is correct. Also, Fort Benning and ICE, the Immigration Customs and Enforcement Agency, which is doing a lot in this state and gets underreported and unheralded for especially going after criminal gangs. But the ICE facility is going to be expanded over there at Fort Benning, and I think that is a winner.
Kathy, we have about 15 seconds because Phil
Democratic primary line of the evening, Cory Booker. Hell yeah, we're going to take your AK-47. I like that. He's a winner for me.
All right, thank you all so much.
Oh, never mind.
For watching,
Beto.
and we will see you all next week. Bye, everybody.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.